2 weeks ago was the excuses that Moses made. How hesitant he was when he went to that burning bush there, and God spoke to him and told him, that he wanted him to go and deliver the people. And he made one excuse after the other, and it began to create some problems. These excuses at first proceeded from humility and a real concern, but after the Lord had promised Moses that he would remove all the difficulties and give him the final success, then for Moses to continue on shrinking back and complaining of his unfitness was to show distrust in God. It implied very clearly a fear that God was unable to qualify him for the work which he called him to do, or that God had made a mistake in selecting Moses. So finally he realizes that he is without excuse before God, and he begins to make preparation to go down into Egypt. And I want you to pick this up with me in verse 15. It says, "And thou shalt speak unto him and put words in his mouth." Speaking of Aaron, he's told him to go down and he's going to meet Aaron along the way. And God's going to put words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. Okay? If we would just wait upon the Lord, he still will daily teach us what we should be doing. And so he said, he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be, even he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of a God. So there you go. Aaron's the mouthpiece, but you are my representative before Aaron and everybody there. So whatever you say to Aaron, you better make sure it's right. You stand before Pharaoh and everyone else in my place. What an awesome responsibility that would be. An awesome responsibility. But by the way, you realize that every mother and father do just that very thing? You are to your children in the place of God. And that is a very awesome thing. So we find as it goes on here, he says, "And you shall take this rod in thine hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs." So Moses is told that Aaron, his elder brother, who having been in daily use of the language of the Egyptians, was able to speak the language perfectly. He was told that Aaron was on his way to meet him, and that he could make no further resistance, for every ground of excuse was now totally removed. He would, to paraphrase what God may have been saying to Moses, is what Grandma used to say to me: hush up. Hush up. There's nothing more that needs to be said. The divine command given Moses found him still self-distrustful, slow of speech and timid. He was overwhelmed with the sense of his incapacity to be a mouthpiece for God to Israel. But once having accepted the work, he entered upon it with his whole heart, putting all of his trust in God. And God blessed his ready obedience, and Moses now became eloquent, hopeful, self-possessed, and well-fitted for the greatest work ever given to man. And my friends, this is an example of what God does to strengthen the character of those who trust him fully and give themselves unreservedly to him. We will gain power and efficiency as we accept the responsibilities that God has placed upon us, and with our whole being seek to qualify ourselves to bear those responsibilities. So however humble your position, however limited your ability, you will attain to true greatness by trusting in divine strength and seeking to perform your work with fidelity. Now, had Moses entered upon his work in his own strength and in his own wisdom and eagerly accepted this great charge, he would have revealed that he was totally useless for such a work, that he was unfit for it. That self-assuredness we don't need. The fact that an individual feels their weakness is at least some evidence that they realize the magnitude of the work appointed them, and they will make God their counselor and strength because they can't do it themselves. So that sense of timidity or unworthiness or even inability is not in itself evil, because we of ourselves are unable. It's an indication we realize that we can't, but then we move forward realizing that what we can't, He can, and allow Him to do what He needs to do. So Moses now returns to his father-in-law Jethro, and he expresses his desire to visit his brethren in Egypt, and Jethro tells him, go in peace. Let's pick our study up here in verse 18 now. Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said unto him, let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. Now notice, here's Moses. How old is Moses?
88.
80 years old. And he still asked permission of his father-in-law. You see, this willingness to accept the authority and the wisdom of others is just something that's beyond our Western mind. You know, when you look at throughout the whole Bible, I mean, here Isaac, how old was Isaac when Dad sent a servant to choose a wife for him? 40 years old. So this willingness, Jacob, he gets deceived by one of his relatives and then works another 14 years there. But they submitted. We don't understand that concept, because if Mom tells you to make your bed, you don't want to do it. If Dad tells you to cut the grass, you don't want to do it. We've always got some reason not to do what those that God has set over us tells us to do. But Moses went to Jethro and said, I want to go check on my relatives and see if they're still all alive down there. So he says, go ahead and go. Then he says, Moses took his wife and his sons and set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. So Moses now gathers his family together. He takes the rod that had turned to a serpent, and he heads out toward Egypt. And the Lord said unto Moses, when thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. And we'll see later how all of that develops. But God's given him instructions still up in Midian as to what is to take place down there. And God keeps re-emphasizing these instructions all the way through here. So all of those that had sought Moses' life was dead. He takes the rod of God and he sets out with his wife and his children on that journey. He didn't dare make known to Jethro the object of his true mission to Egypt, because Jethro probably would have said, "You're not taking my daughter down there, and you're not going to go." You see, when God calls us to do something, oftentimes we're fearful to let other people know what God has called us to do, because of the way that they may react. But you notice he didn't say, I'm going to take Zipporah, and I'm going to take your grandkids, and I'm going to go down to Egypt, and I'm going to confront that Pharaoh. I know somebody told me they were going to take my daughter and do something like that. I wouldn't be too pleased with that concept. And so he didn't let him know. But before reaching Egypt, Moses himself thought it best for his family's own safety not to go, and he sent them back home. But early on the way from Midian, Moses received a very startling and terrible warning of the Lord's displeasure. Last weekend, I referred to this quotation in one of the presentations, when an angel appeared to him in a threatening manner, as if he was going to immediately destroy him. Look in verse 24. "And it came to pass by the way in the end that the Lord met him and sought to kill him." So here God says, you go to Egypt. Moses is on his way to Egypt, and all of a sudden the Lord appears to him, and it looks like he's going to kill him. Now you would think, well, Moses would say, "No, whoa, Lord, well, I'm going where you told me to do. Why you want to do this to me?" But Moses knew. It came to Moses' mind as to what had happened. Moses had disregarded one of God's commandments, yielding to his wife's will. How often do the husbands yield what they know to be right to their wives? How often do the wives yield what they know to be God's will to appease their husbands? It's nothing new. Remember, Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. We sometimes do not do what we know God asked us to do because somebody else doesn't approve of it. We have people that don't come to prayer meeting because the husband gets mad. You spend too much time at church. We have people that will go out on places on the Sabbath because their husband gets mad and says, you put your church before me. We compromise along the way there. And Moses knew what he was supposed to do, but to keep peace in the family, he didn't. He had neglected to perform the rite of circumcision upon their youngest son. He had failed to comply with the condition by which his child could be entitled to the blessings of God's covenant with Israel, and such a neglect on the part of the chosen leader of the entire nation of Israel could not do anything but lessen the force of God's divine precepts upon the entire nation. So Zipporah, seeing what's going on there herself, fearing that her husband's going to be slain, herself circumcises the son, and then the angel permits Moses to go on his journey. Watch what it says here. "And it came to pass by the way at the end that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his Moses' feet, saying, Surely a bloody husband art thou to me." She still doesn't want to do this. She's not pleased with the act, but she figures, well, I'll cut a little skin off to save all of his skin. And so he let him go and said, "A bloody husband thou art, because of the circumcision." You see the difference when people are of different mindsets pertaining to the will of God? It can create some real trouble. Some real trouble. Now, she says that Go ahead, you're just a bloody husband. That may be the time. I don't know exactly what point in time it was he sent her home, but that may have been the point in time that he sent her back home for her own safety. And in his mission to Pharaoh, Moses now was to be placed in a position of great peril. His life could be preserved only through the protection of God and his angels. You don't go before the most powerful guy in the world and tell him what he's going to have to do or what's going to happen to him and walk away from there. You don't find accounts of that happening except as God preserves these people. But if Moses, living in neglect of a known duty, he could not have been secure in the task that was before him, for he could not have been shielded by the angels of God. In the time of trouble, just before the second coming of Jesus, the righteous will be preserved only through the ministration of angels. But there will be no security for the transgressors of God's law. Angels cannot then protect those who are disregarding God's commandments, willfully saying, I will not do it. So in the account here, in chapter 4, verse 27 now, the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. And he went and met him in the mount of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord who had sent him, and all the signs which he had commanded him. And Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spake all the words which the Lord had spoken unto Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked upon their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshiped. See, Aaron was instructed by God and the angels to go out into the wilderness, head up toward Midian, and he met his brother, and they'd been separated for these 40 years now. They met in the desert near Mount Horeb. There they communed together. Moses told Aaron all of what had happened, what he was supposed to do, and together they journeyed into Egypt, and having reached the land of Goshen, they proceeded to assemble all of the leaders of the elders of Israel. Aaron repeated to all of them what had taken place, and then the signs that God had given Moses were all shown to the people. Those things that happened on the mount were repeated again. And then it says that the people believed and bowed their heads and worshiped. But now is about to begin a great tug of war. A tremendous clash of wheels between this exiled sheep herder and the most powerful man in the world. These two brothers enter the palace of Pharaoh as ambassadors from the King of Kings. And they spoke in his name and said, thus saith the Lord, let my people go. Notice verse 5 opens with, and afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. And they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice unto the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. And the king of Egypt said unto them, wherefore do ye, Moses and Aaron, lift up people from their work? Get you unto your burdens. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land now are many, and ye make them rest from their burdens. 3 days' journey into the desert. That's all they asked for in the beginning. That isn't bad. Let them go out into the desert 3 days so that they can worship. We just want to sacrifice unto the Lord our God. But you see, the news that Moses and Aaron were exciting the people had already reached Pharaoh before they came into it. And his anger was already kindled against them. Wherefore do ye, Moses and Aaron, hinder the people from their works? What are you doing, hinder? They're supposed to be out there working, and you're coming in here stirring up the workplace. He said, get to your burdens. You see, already the kingdom had suffered loss by the interference of these strangers. Already implications had taken place. And at that thought of saying, get back to work, he says, behold, the people of the land now are many, and you make them rest from their burdens. You see, during this time of captivity, many of the Israelites had lost sight of the law of God. The Sabbath had been generally disregarded, and the exactions of their taskmasters made its observance apparently impossible. But Moses, one of the first things he did was show his people that obedience to God was the first condition of deliverance. And the efforts made to restore the observance of the Sabbath had come to the notice of the Egyptians. They're resting. They're taking this day off. They're not supposed to do that. You're causing problems. Pharaoh now suspected the Israelites of a design to revolt from his service. They're going to get a day off now. They're going to get together. They're going to rise up against us. So disaffection was the result of idleness in his mind. So he would see to it that they'd have no time left for this dangerous scheming and resting this one day of the week. And he at once adopted measures to tighten their bonds and to crush out that independent spirit he saw arising. And the same day orders were issued that rendered their labor still more cruel and oppressive. You see, the most common building material of that period and in that country was sun-dried bricks. And so they would cut straw and mix it with the mud or the clay there and form them together to hold the bricks together. And so now these large quantities of straw that had been provided, the king says, we're not going to furnish it anymore. You guys are going to go out and gather your own straw for the brick. But the number or the tally of bricks is not to diminish. They're still going to have to make as many bricks, but now more work is added to it. Well, that didn't go over too well with them. Watch what takes place next in verse 6 here. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, you shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the tell of the bricks which they did make heretofore shall ye lay upon them. You shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. Don't pay any attention to what Moses is saying. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spake to the people, saying, thus saith Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go ye, get you straw where you can find it. Yet not aught of your work shall be diminished. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. And the taskmasters hastened them, saying, fulfill your work, your daily task, as when there was straw. That's not a good situation to be in, is it? You're going to go out and you're going to do all of this. This order produced great distress among the Israelites, as you can well imagine. The Egyptian taskmasters that had been put over them and the Hebrew officers were beginning to experience great difficulties. You see, when the requirement of Pharaoh was put in force, the people scattered themselves throughout the land to gather stubble instead of straw, but they found it impossible to accomplish the usual amount. So as a result, the Hebrew overseers were beaten by the Egyptian taskmasters. These officers now, supposing that their oppression came from the taskmasters and not from Pharaoh himself, went to Pharaoh with their grievances. They thought these taskmasters were just getting downright mean and unruly. And so in verse 14, he says, "And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, Whereof have ye not fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today, as heretofore? Then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, Wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants? There is no straw given to thy servants. And they say to us, Make brick, and behold, thy servants are beaten. But the fault is in thine own people." So they're protesting now. Their complaint was met, though, by Pharaoh with a taunt. Pharaoh says here, "But ye are idle. Ye are idle. Therefore you say, Let us go and do sacrifice to the Lord." You're going right back to that same thing. You're not working as hard as you used to. You're taking that day off. Go back to work again. You're just too idle there. And then he goes on and says, "Go thou therefore now and work, for there shall no straw be given you, yet you shall deliver the tale of bricks." And the officers of the children of Israel did see that they were in evil case, after it was said, "You shall not diminish aught from your bricks of your daily task." They were ordered back to work with the declaration that their burdens were in no way going to be lightened, and returning back to work, they met Moses and Aaron along the way. And boy, did they light into that. Watch this. They met Moses and Aaron, who stood in the way as they came forth from Pharaoh. And they said unto them, "The Lord look upon you, and judge, because you have made our savor to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. Moses, it's your fault we're in this condition, and you're going to get us killed." And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, "Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated the people? Why is it that thou hast sent me?" Moses listened to the people, listened to their reproaches, listened to all of the complaints, and he was greatly distressed by it. By the way, any of you that are leaders in the church, it does stress you to have to listen to complaints and bickering and all of these type of things. It's a part of leadership, though. It's a part of leadership. And Moses was having trouble. It was disheartening. The sufferings of the people had been increased. All over the land, a cry of despair was going up from young to old. And everybody, every one of God's people there were charging Moses and Aaron with all of their problems. And so in bitterness of soul, Moses goes to God. So again, leaders, I want to talk to you for just a minute. When it comes, and it will, I guarantee you that, Go to God. Then pour your heart out to God. He understands. He already knows what's going on. He knows everything, every foul thing, every accusation, every untruth, every bit of murmuring and whispering and seeking to blacken character or do misrepresentation. Go to God and watch what happens here. Picking it up in 22 and 23 now. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? Did you not give me this job to do? I don't understand what's happening. You told me to come down here. You told me you would be with me. You told me these people would be delivered. You told me these people would listen. You know, they had listened, hadn't they? When it looked like it was going to come for nothing, they were ready for it. Yeah, we believe. Yeah, let's just go. But when the going got tough, they didn't want to go anymore. They wanted Moses to go. Get out of our life. And Moses says, why is it that you sent me? This isn't what you said was going to happen. But he forgot something, didn't he? God did say this was going to happen. He just didn't go into great detail on this part of it. But he said he's not going to do it. For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he has done evil to this people. Neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. God answers him. The answer came back to him in verse 9 for the next chapter. Then the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. I like that. Moses is saying, God, it's not working the way I thought it was supposed to. Things haven't been going. God, am I really supposed to be here? Why haven't they gone? Why haven't they turned us loose? And all God says is, now shalt thou see what I will do. Moses, it doesn't have to do with you. Moses, I will show you what I will do, because I will bring things around in such a way, in my way, that Pharaoh is not only going to let him go, he's going to run them off. Get them out of the land. He'll drive them out. And so we're going to pick our study up here next time. When Pharaoh finally starts to listen, to let my